Welcome to this press briefing. My name is Marie-Agnes Heine and I'm the head of EMA's Communication Department. And today we want to provide you with an update on the analysis of data on Vaxzevria, the COVID-19 vaccine from AstraZeneca, and the interim opinion issued today by EMA's Human Medicines Committee, CHMP, which aims to support EU member states in taking decisions on how to best use this vaccine in their national vaccination campaigns. I'm delighted to have here with me Dr. Noël Vathion, EMA's Deputy Executive Director, and Dr. Peter Arlett, the EMA Head of Analytics. In addition, we have Dr. Marco Cavalieri, the Head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy at EMA, who will be able to provide you with additional information on the vaccine as needed. So how we will run this press briefing. Please note that your microphone is muted by default for the duration of the briefing. We will first hear short remarks from Mr. Vathion and Dr. Arlett, and then we will have about half an hour for questions. Today's briefing is broadcast via YouTube and Europe by satellite. The footage can be used free of charge, and you will find the respective links in the invite you received earlier today. I'm now handing over to EMA's Deputy Executive Director. Mr. Vathion, please.
Thank you very much, Marie-Agnes, and good afternoon. Vaxzevria COVID-19 vaccine from AstraZeneca is one of the 4 vaccines that have currently been authorized in the European Union to prevent COVID-19, which can cause severe disease and death. The disease can also have long-term consequences in people of all ages, including in otherwise healthy people. The benefits of Vaxzevria outweigh its risk in adults of all age groups, as already confirmed by the agency. However, very rare cases of blood clots with low blood platelets have occurred following vaccination. On the 7th of April, EMA included additional safety information in the product information to inform about possible adverse effects. It was important to make doctors and patients aware of this rare complication so it can be spotted early and specialist treatment can be undertaken without delay. To support the Member States in their vaccination campaigns, the European Health Commissioner Stella Kyriakides requested on the 9th of April that EMA would look into 2 aspects. The first question asked related to the fact that EMA should further describe the risk of this rare side effect in the context of the benefits for different age groups and different rates of infection. Today we can provide you with an update on the work we have done so far. Only 2 weeks have gone since the request from the Commissioner. This is based on an interim opinion which was agreed today by our scientific committee, the CHMP, and that committee concluded by consensus. COVID-19 affects all member states, but it affects them differently in terms of infection rates, in terms of hospitalization, in terms of morbidity and mortality. EMA has, in a very short time frame, in collaboration with the member state experts, developed a dedicated model, which has also been endorsed by our scientific committee, the CHMP. Our model allows to contextualize the available data should provide member states with additional information that can help them to take decisions on national vaccination campaigns based on scientific evidence and real-life data. We will shortly be publishing a full assessment report explaining in detail the interim opinion of our scientific committee, hence providing full transparency. We have already published today examples of graphic representations which will be included as part of our analysis. For this review, we have received data from our partner agency, the ECDC, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. In addition, we asked the member states to provide stratified data on the rollout of the vaccines per age group and gender, and we are very grateful for the member states who have provided this information in a very short time frame. In this analysis, it was not possible to further stratify risk by sex, as data on sex was received from only a subset of member states. However, today we can give further information to contextualize potential risk depending on age and the level of infection. Based on data from initial clinical trials and early real-world evidence collected as of the start of national vaccination campaigns, we carried out an analysis of benefits and risks during different stages of COVID-19 exposure and how both the vaccine and the disease may affect different age groups in different situations. Our interim conclusion is that overall, the data show that the benefits of vaccination increase with age and with increasing levels of infection in the community. It is important to state that this is an interim analysis and may be subject to change as new data become available. However, it should be a useful guide for EU member states when adjusting their vaccination strategies depending on the infection rates and ages of people who will still need to be vaccinated. The European Commission also asked a second question, namely for the agency to provide a recommendation on the administration of the second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine on the basis of the available data. Our response at this stage is that the available data supports continuing to give a second dose of the Vaxzevria vaccine between 4 and 12 weeks after the first, in line with the product information. The data did not support delaying or avoiding a second dose of the vaccine. For persons that will not receive a second AstraZeneca dose at present, there are no or limited data available on alternatives. I will hand over now to Dr. Peter Arlett, who will explain in more detail how we carried out our assessment and its first outcome.
Thank you. I will now explain further our methodology and the first results from our analysis. To support decision-making relating to vaccination campaigns at national level, it's important to contextualise the risk of blood clots with low platelets with the expected benefits of vaccination stratified by age and considering the background infection rate. Potential benefits of vaccination with the AstraZeneca vaccine were quantified for the following three outcomes. Firstly, COVID-19 related hospitalisation prevented. Secondly, COVID-19 related intensive care unit admissions prevented. Thirdly, COVID-19 related deaths prevented. As potential benefits depend on the level of exposure to the virus, as well as individual characteristics, notably age, our analysis took into consideration age categories, background virus exposure using COVID-19 surveillance data at EU level, which draws from data provided by EU countries, and these were categorised as low, medium or high exposure to drive the model. These are based on the infection rates in Europe in September, January and March for low, high and medium exposure, respectively. The COVID events prevented per 100,000 vaccinated patients were calculated based on different assumptions of vaccine effectiveness, together with the background incidence of virus exposure, and applied to the number of COVID-related hospitalisations, ICU admissions and deaths. The work clearly shows that the favourable effects of vaccination compared to the rare, very rare blood clots get bigger with increasing age and increasing infection rates. Today, 9 graphics have been published for the three outcomes, hospitalisations, ICU admissions and deaths avoided, assuming an 80% vaccine effectiveness over a 4-month period, and the 3 levels of virus exposure, low, medium and high. As an example of the results of the work, we observe that hospital admissions prevented exceeds blood clots across all age categories and all virus exposure levels. ICU admissions prevented exceeds blood clots across all age categories for medium and high virus exposures, and deaths prevented exceeds blood clots in those above 30 for high virus exposure, above 40 for medium virus exposure, and above 60 for low virus exposure. So to summarise, the COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented global public health challenge. More than 3 million lives have been lost worldwide, and every day thousands of people in Europe are dying from COVID-19. The AstraZeneca vaccine is highly effective at preventing infection and therefore hospitalisation and death. Very rare cases of blood clots with low platelets have been reported, and these are now listed as very rare side effects of the vaccine. Their early recognition and specialist treatment is the cornerstone of minimising the risk. The benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risks, and the work we introduce today puts these very rare blood clots into the context of COVID hospitalisations prevented, intensive care admissions prevented, and deaths prevented. Importantly, the data show that the benefits of vaccination increase with age and increasing levels of infection in the community. We hope that this work will support the Member States in their decisions on how to optimise the use of vaccines based on local infection rates. Our work goes on. The safety of all the COVID vaccines is our top priority, and all new data will be evaluated immediately, and the public will be kept up to date. The benefit-risk balance of the AstraZeneca vaccine is positive. It is preventing serious disease and saving lives. We will continue to ensure close monitoring and clear communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arlett and Mr. Vachon. We will now open up the floor for questions, and you know the routine. So if you wish to ask a question, please click on the emoticon icon at the bottom of the WebEx window and click on Raise Hand. When I give you the floor, please unmute yourself and turn on the camera. You can then ask your question. So the first question we have is from Naomi Kreske from Bloomberg. Naomi, please.
So the AstraZeneca vaccine is positive. It is preventing serious disease and saving lives. We will continue to ensure close monitoring and clear communication. Thank you.
Naomi, are you online? Can you hear us?
Dr. Arlett and Mr. Vachon, we will now open up the floor for questions.
Naomi, do you hear us? Hello?
Mute
Naomi?
camera and then ask your question. So the first question we have is from Naomi Kreske from Bloomberg. Naomi, please.
So the AstraZeneca vaccine is positive.
Hello?
It is preventing serious
Yes, we hear you, but there's some background noise.
I'm hearing a little bit of feedback.
Perhaps you can put your question in the
this is
chat.
EMA Press from Bloomberg. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but there's this background noise.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Much
Yes.
better. Yeah,
Yes, I do.
If you speak very loud.
So just so we're clear, as we look at these charts that you presented, yes, can you hear?
We can hear you. Naomi? Yes, we hear you, but there's some background noise. So we have a technical problem here. So I suggest that we go ahead with the chat and you put your questions in the chat and we are taking it from the chat. I apologize for that, but hopefully this is going to work. So Naomi, if you can put your question in the chat, that would be great. And the others can already start putting their questions in the chat because it will take perhaps a little bit of time to put it there. So please get started. So I'm going to take then, to kind of speed this up a little bit, I take a question from Aude Lecubré, who asked, let me just check, I've seen her question, where is it? No. Okay. That is difficult. Now, David Meyer has a question. So Does EMA have up-to-date European totals of the clotting case numbers and death toll? I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Arlett. Peter, please.
So thanks for the question. We are stepping back a little bit from giving out numbers this afternoon because the whole point of today is to contextualise the risk assessment that was performed by the PRAC. So what you will see in the document that has been published is 9 different scenarios of risk contextualisation, looking at the 3 different infection rates of low, medium and high, and the 3 different outcomes in terms of hospitalisations prevented, intensive care unit admissions prevented, and deaths prevented. And those are the main outputs that we are putting forward for contextualisation. Clearly, case reports come in on the safety of the vaccines across the spectrum of safety issues every day. These are being monitored, and we haven't seen any change to the pattern in terms of what has previously been recorded. In other words, there are cases of thrombosis with low blood platelets being recorded, and that's in line with what we've seen previously. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So now we have the question from Aude Le Cubré from Medscape. So can you give an update of the unusual thrombosis, thrombocytopenia number of cases reported to the EMA for AstraZeneca, of course, but also for the Janssen vaccine, Moderna, and any other vaccine you have got information on? Dr. Arlett, this is also for you.
So I'm going to give the same answer that we're not going to give out in the press conference live, the numbers, because that's not the main focus this afternoon. What we want to do is to put the numbers and the assessments that we've done already into the context of the benefits. And so I repeat my answer that the different contextual graphics that have been put into the public domain are the main product for the discussion this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Then we have a question from Cormac Sheridan from BioWorld. Do you consider the rare clotting events with thrombocytopenia to be a class effect? And would you also expect to see similar problems with the Sputnik vaccine? I'm going to give that question to Dr. Cavalieri.
In actual fact, we don't know yet what is the mechanism behind these rare events. And we are right now in the process of starting a number of investigations that hopefully will clarify at the soonest what really is the mechanism that is causing them. Of course, the fact that they have occurred with both the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Janssen one that are based on an adenoviral vector technology would lead to the importance of checking whether other vaccines that use the same technology could be at risk of such events. And we will be discussing with all the developers that will be proposing this kind of technology to us for a potential approval in the European Union. Nevertheless, since we really don't know the mechanism, we are looking at all platform technology in order to understand whether any of them could be associated with the same rare events.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavalieri. It seems that we have solved the problem, so I'm going to try again. So we have Aine Fox from PA Media. Can you perhaps ask your question? Aine, please, do you hear us? Still seems to be a problem, but I think we have next Gretchen Vogel. Do you hear us? Can you talk? Can you ask your question?
I can hear you.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, okay. And no other noises. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. Yes, it looks like there's a slightly higher risk in some age groups compared to others. Is that based on the ages of the cases that you've seen, or is it still unclear if there's a difference in risk based on age and there's some other reason behind those differences in those categories?
Thank you very much. That's a question for Dr. Arlett.
So thanks for the question. Yes, the graphical representations which you've seen do show more cases in the younger age groups than the older age groups. And the other striking observation from the graphics is the increase in the benefits as you go up the age bands. So just for those who don't have the graphics in front of them, for the 9 different scenarios I mentioned earlier, so low, medium and high exposure levels, and hospitalisations avoided, intensive care unit admissions avoided and deaths avoided, we graphically represent the cases prevented against cases of blood clots with low platelets by 10-year age bracket, so 20 to 29, 30 to 39, right up to 80 plus. Indeed, you can see that there is a slight preponderance of cases in the lower age brackets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Ludwig Berger from Reuters. Ludwig, please.
Thank you, and I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Just in summary, if you were to explain today's findings or recommendations to, I don't know, your aging uncle or aging aunt, in very simple terms, what's the reveal today? What's the insight today, as opposed to what we already know about your opinion or EMA's opinion about the AstraZeneca shot? And secondly, did I understand it correctly that some member states were not able to provide sex-specific vaccine numbers on this issue?
I give the first question to Mr. Vathion and the second one to Dr. Arlett.
Perhaps I can try to address both. In terms for the second question, I think we have to take into account that we have tried to develop within an extremely short time frame a methodology which had the support from throughout the EU, in which I think we succeeded. Secondly, that we had to populate that particular model with data that have been requested only 2 weeks ago. So on that basis, we have received information from member states. Indeed, in relation to the issue about gender, we have received only from a subset of member states. This is only an interim opinion, as we have stated, so we will still receive additional information, which we will put into the model so that we can fine-tune it and see if the current conclusions that we have still need to be fine-tuned later on. The first question you still have to remember.
The first question was, what is actually the news today, in addition to what we have said before?
Yeah, but I think the news today, as I've stated before, is what we'll see. And, of course, you may not have yet seen the visualization, so the different scenarios that we have been developing. But if you would look into that, you would see that you have to take into account the situations which may be different within the member states at different moments in time, with a high level of the pandemic, a low level of the pandemic, a medium level of the pandemic. The situation also in terms of member states, how they're rolling out their national vaccination programs. And what you will see then is that the older you get, the more benefits you will see, and also in a situation with higher infection rates. I think that is one of the main messages. When you then will look into the visualization, so in the different graphs that we will publishing or we have published in the meantime, you will then see what that means in each of those scenarios.
Next one is Danny Kemp from AFP. Danny, please.
Sorry, hi, I'll be right with you. Sorry about the delay. Hello, hi. Apologies if that has been asked already. I was slightly concentrating on writing there. I wanted to ask why you've been focusing on the adenovirus vector vaccines so far, rather than the mRNA vaccines, given that there have been cases of these clots associated with all the vaccines. Thank you.
I give that question to Dr. Cavalieri.
Yeah, indeed, as stated before, we have been looking at all the vaccines that are on the market and that are under use in the context of these massive vaccination campaigns. And so far, what we've seen is that the increase in the events occurred with the AstraZeneca vaccine, but not with the messenger RNA, despite the large use that has been occurring in the European Union and also in other parts of the world. And that's why these these rare adverse effects so far have been possible to be discussed in the context of the use of this adenoviral vector, so AstraZeneca, but also based on the emerging data from the United States, also with the Janssen one. And as you know, the Janssen one will be discussed in the United States today as well. So this is where we stand. But as said, we are looking at all the vaccines, and if we see an increase of cases with any of the other vaccine, of course, we will start to look at them more in detail and to try to understand whether there is any connection or association. But so far, this did not come out.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Helen Collis from Politico. Helen, please.
Hi, thank you very much. Could you tell me at what point would the committee recommend a change or restriction to the marketing authorization? What are the parameters for that with regards to this side effect? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Arlett, please.
Thanks for the question. It's an important question. If we look at the different benefit scenarios and look at the different infection rates, we can see that for all age categories, benefits occur in some scenarios. And on that basis, the committee has clearly concluded that the overall benefit risk remains positive. So we can only talk about the data we have today, and it's perhaps not helpful to speculate a what if in the future, but based on today's contextualisation work in all age categories, there are benefits from vaccination, and these are particularly prominent at high background infection rates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Susie Ring from Bloomberg. Susie?
Hi there. I'm struggling to understand why the age recommendation hasn't changed, because when you look at the graphs, the risk does seem to outweigh the benefit for those under 30 and even under 40, maybe, for death and ICU admission. I understand what you're saying, I think, because there's still risk of hospitalisation for some of those age groups. But given that ICU and death, the risk is greater with the vaccine than without for those ages, I can't understand why the recommendation hasn't changed. Could you explain?
Dr. Arlett, I think that's a follow-up question.
Yes. So if you look at one benefit in isolation with the risk of thrombosis with low platelets, and you focus just on one graphic looking at one benefit, I can understand your interpretation. But we need to look at all of the benefits as a composite, if you like, and then look across all of the scenarios. And if you do that and consider that in some member states there will be very high infection rates, the benefits continue to be positive in certain scenarios in all of the age categories. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Now, Loveday Morris from the Washington Post. Loveday, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just suppose I'd like some, again, for you to clarify just what the graphs mean in maybe just normal language. Is that correct, that characterization that the risks of ICU admission and deaths are higher with the vaccine under certain circumstances? I mean, is that fair to say?
I hand over to Dr. Arlett.
No, it absolutely isn't correct. That's not a correct statement to say about these graphs. The vaccines in all scenarios prevent hospitalisations, prevent admission to intensive care unit, prevent deaths. Those benefits increase with age. Those benefits increase with higher infection rates. What you're seeing in the graphs is those benefits put side by side with the number of cases of blood clots with low platelets. That's what you're seeing. But in all cases, in all scenarios, the vaccination is preventing hospitalisation, intensive care unit admission and death. Thank you.
I also hand to Mr. Batillon for a complimentary comment.
Yes, thank you, Marianne. Yes, and on top of that, and coming back to some questions that have been asked in terms of the need for regulatory action, when you are talking about regulatory action, we have to consider that what we have been doing now today is a risk contextualization on the basis of data which have been submitted by ECDC, by member states, etc. Before you can conclude on any particular change, a regulatory change, for instance, in terms of changes to the product information, restricting to certain patient population groups, etc., you need to have to conclude a full benefit risk evaluation. You need further data in order to do so before you can take any particular regulatory action. What we have done at this particular occasion is that we have taken the data from ECDC, from the member states, we have put them into context. On that basis, we have developed different scenarios which may apply across the EU. So the situation in one country is not the same as in another country. The situation in one country at this moment may not be the same in a few months' time. So member states can see, on the basis of the agreed methodology, where they exactly are at this moment in time and what best decision that they can make in terms of their national vaccination strategy. It is too early at this moment in time to consider any particular regulatory change. In order to do so, we need to have much more evidence in terms of benefits and risk, which then have to be weighted against each other. That is how the normal process in terms of regulatory changes works. Thank you.
Many thanks. We have now a question from Martina Davis, New York Times. Martina.
Hi, and thanks. And I'm really sorry to go back to the request from colleagues for just slightly plainer language to interpret the graphic representation. I know you did the graphic representation to make it easier for us to understand. Is it fair to say then that if you're a younger person under 39 and especially under 29, it only really makes a lot of sense to opt for that vaccine if you're in what you guys define as a high infection scenario? It seems that I understand the description of a scale of benefits that increase with age, but it's also very clear that there are some lessons to be learned here for younger age groups, and I'm just trying to parse that.
Many thanks. Dr. Alet, please.
Thanks for the question. So again, we are looking at hospitalizations prevented, intensive care unit admissions prevented and deaths prevented in these three different scenarios of infection rate. It's important to state that hospitalisation with COVID-19 is extremely serious, and a significant proportion, and that proportion increases with age, will die following admission. So the reason I say that is that you can see in the comparison for hospitalisations that there's a significant benefit in terms of avoiding hospitalisation across all age groups. The data on ICU admissions and on deaths, there are too few events in the younger age group to show that benefit. But for hospitalisation, the data are very clear. Thank you.
The next question comes from Lorenzo Consoli from Asca News. Lorenzo, please.
Hope you can hear me because it seems there's a problem.
You need to speak up. We don't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit closer to the mic, please.
I have it very close. Can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, my question is a little bit more precise than my colleagues on the groups of age. I don't understand, even if you contextualize the whole issue with the three categories you have chosen: hospitalization, intensive care, and death. I don't understand why it's reasonable for member states to exclude from the vaccination with AstraZeneca people in the range of age between 50 and 60, for instance. Because if I look at the graph, it's clear that there is a massive weight in favor of AstraZeneca vaccination for this group of age, but they are excluded mostly because they are below 60. And in doing so, member states are actually exposing that to much higher risk of dying of COVID if they get COVID than of getting the blood clots as a collateral effect of the vaccine. So why don't you say that? Because there is a clear misuse of the precautionary principle here. Thanks.
I give that question to Mr. Mathieu.
Yes, thank you. We are not excluding anything. I think on the basis of the analysis that we have performed, once again, in taking into account a methodology that has been approved across the EU, we are saying to the member states, we have put the risk into context. And we have already explained the parameters that we are using for that. So the member states now have an overview of the different scenarios, and the member states can still decide on the basis of this outcome how they would like to use that at national level, taking into account the national situation, which, as I've stated before, may change from today to tomorrow. Today, member states may be in a very bad situation in terms of the pandemic. That may go easier over the summer period, so they can see how to best use this particular outcome. We are not excluding anything. If we would, however, on the basis of this exercise, which I have explained before, is not the appropriate exercise, if we would go over to regulatory action, then we would exclude. And we do not have enough evidence at this moment in time to do a full benefit-risk assessment for the different age categories. We need more data. We explained to you before that we are still waiting for data from the member states. So once we have that, we will continue the review and we'll see if the outcome that we currently have is that if that needs to be fine-tuned. So to the contrary, we are not excluding, we are facilitating or should be facilitating the work of the member states.
Many thanks. Now we try again Naomi Kreske from Bloomberg, who we did not hear before very well. Naomi, does it work now?
We would exclude. And we do not have enough evidence.
No, I think it's your problem, Naomi. I'm sorry. Okay. But if you don't, well, we have one last question, I think, which is from Yanis Palailogos. The infection rates, he asked, are there cases per 100,000 over a 14-day period? Peter, that's a question for you, definitely.
Thanks very much indeed. So the we classify low exposure modelled on virus circulation from September at 55 per 100,000 of the population per month. For medium exposure, 400 per 100,000 of the population per month, and for high exposure, 886 per 100,000 of the population per month. Thank you.
Many thanks. So we have another follow-up question, two follow-up questions, and then we close. I think one is from Cormac Sheridan. Cormac?
Yeah, thank you. General question for the panel. I'm not sure who should ask this one, but this afternoon, Sputnik, from a Twitter account, the people behind the Sputnik vaccine, claimed that they conducted a study in which they found that significantly more deaths were seen following vaccination with the Pfizer mRNA vaccine than with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And they claim that this conclusion is based on data from 13 international regulators. Do you have any comment on that study or that claim?
Yeah, Dr. Cavalieri, please.
As said, we are monitoring closely the safety in the post-approval phase also for the messenger RNA vaccine. As I said, we have not identified considerable risks that have been emerging with the use of this vaccine so far. Of course, a number of deaths may have occurred after vaccination, but that is not going to be linked with the vaccination itself, but it's just occurring at the same time. So far, we have not really spotted something along the line of what have been stated here. Nevertheless, as said, we will continue to monitor if anything will be occurring also with the use of this vaccine that I may have to remind you, in the European Union, we are talking almost around 60 million doses already administered so far.
Thank you very much. I'm now reading Naomi Kreske from Bloomberg's question. I think we already touched on this, but I'm going to nevertheless ask it. So if we look at these numbers, it seems that the risk of side effects would outweigh the deaths presented for people under age 40 at a low infection rate. Is this correct? Does this mean that in places with infection rates at 55 per 100,000 cases daily, it doesn't make sense to use this vaccine for younger people? Dr. Arlett, please.
So, just to remind, the conclusion is that the overall benefit risk of this vaccine is positive in all adult age categories, and that's not changed by the contextualisation exercise we're presenting today. We need to see that these are specific comparisons of blood clots against individual benefits, so deaths avoided, hospitalisations avoided, and intensive care unit admissions avoided. And what we see is that there are benefits in all age categories in some scenarios, and that the benefits of vaccination go up with age and the benefits of vaccination go up with the background infection rate. We do this exercise to support decision-making by the Member States, who can then use the model and use the data in their local situation to optimise the use of the vaccines. Thank you.
I'm now taking the last question from Helen Collis from Politico.
Hi there, thank you. Just going back, Noel, to your last comments about another full benefit of risk evaluation needed to change any marketing authorisation. You said you're waiting for more data from member states, and once you have that process, that evaluation will take place. Am I understanding that rightly? And if that's correct, when do you anticipate having this complete data set to do that? Thank you.
Mr. Vachon, please.
Yes, I mean, it's not only from member states. I mean, there will also be real-world evidence that we will be seeing. There will be data which will have to be provided by the company. Don't forget, we issue the conditional marketing authorization with studies that have to be performed by the marketing authorization holders within tight time frames. And we are also conducting studies ourselves through programs that we have established with some of the academia. So all this information will be coming in. And it's not only a matter of this particular vaccine. For any product and any medicine or vaccine that is being authorized, we will continuously have evaluating data that is coming in terms of benefits and risks. So this is going to be an ongoing exercise. If, of course, at a given moment in time, we would see that the benefits no longer outweigh the risks, then we are in a completely different situation. But we are not yet at this stage. As we are saying, the overall benefit risk is positive. We have contextualized the risk for the different age groups, and the member states have information in order to see how this best fits in their national vaccination programs. If more information becomes available which alters this particular situation, then of course we have to pursue and undertake the necessary steps.
Thank you very much for your questions and for attending this press briefing. If you have any further questions, please follow up with our press office at press@ema.europa.eu. And to remind you, please look out for the full assessment report, which will be published early next week on our website at ema.europa.eu. Thanks a lot and goodbye.